I was not of an equal stature to Paul Newman. I liked the other part. And he got intrigued by that. He got interested, and then he fought for me to do it. So we met in his apartment in New York.
Before closing his eyes for the last time, Robert Redford left behind a shocking confession. A revelation that not only exposed the truth about himself, but also unveiled the hidden face of Hollywood. One the industry had desperately tried to bury for decades. To the public eye, Redford and Paul Newman were celebrated as the ultimate duo, a golden friendship, a legendary partnership every director dreamed of. But the truth Redford carried in silence was far more than friendship. It was a bond that crossed every boundary, a connection so powerful that Hollywood worked relentlessly to conceal it. He admitted to secret meetings in a secluded house in Utah. Private encounters that often led them into moments far too intimate. Moments that even stirred the jealousy of Newman's wife, who once bitterly confessed, "I felt like an outsider in my own marriage." Redford's final confession not only stunned the world but also raised a haunting question. Has Hollywood been showing us the truth, or just a carefully crafted illusion? What shocked the world was not only the secret relationship itself, but the way Hollywood buried it. Whispers were strangled before they could spread, articles silenced before they saw the light of day, and an entire campaign of silence was orchestrated to protect the flawless image of the Golden Age's perfect leading man. Robert Redford admitted he carried this crushing secret until the end of his life. Not just out of fear of scandal, but because of the overwhelming power of a ruthless industry. An industry always ready to destroy anyone who dared defy its rigid rules. And now, with the final curtain fallen, the question haunting us is no longer were they just friends, or something more. It is, how many other secrets has Hollywood buried beneath its glittering mask? For Redford, Paul Newman was not merely a co-star, he was the greatest secret of his life. In 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid exploded at the box office, launching Redford from an unknown face to an A-list star overnight. Yet the fame of that film was not the ghost that haunted him most. What truly lingered, what tormented him until his dying breath, was the moment he met Paul Newman. Redford remembered New York, 1968, the thick cigarette smoke, the blaring horns, the restless city. A nervous young actor stepped into a cramped audition room, heels worn down, suit barely holding together, certain he could never measure up to a star like Newman. Then Newman appeared. Already an icon. Those piercing blue eyes locked onto Redford, cutting straight into his soul. Redford confessed that gaze consumed him, swallowing him whole with a power both terrifying and irresistible. At first, he believed Newman would remain distant, untouchable. But that was only the beginning. But then, the unexpected happened. Newman stepped forward, his presence towering, his hand firm as he gripped Redford's. "You'll be fine," he said, with a calm certainty. For Redford, those few words pierced through layers of doubt, shattering his insecurity and pulling him into the light. When the studio hesitated, doubting whether an unknown could possibly stand beside Paul Newman, it was Newman himself who delivered the ultimatum, "If it isn't Redford, then I won't do it." That single sentence didn't just launch Redford's career, it branded itself into his heart forever. On set, Redford often found himself quietly in the corner, studying Newman. The way he cracked jokes to break the tension, his thunderous laugh that sent ripples of joy across the crew, or those moments when he grew deadly serious, eyes locked, every muscle focused as the cameras rolled. Paul Newman was a paradox, carefree yet commanding, light-hearted yet heavy with presence. And it was this very duality that drew Redford in, a force he could neither resist nor fully comprehend. What astonished the crew was their effortless chemistry. "All they need is a glance," whispered one member, "and they instantly know what to do." But Redford later admitted, this was not just the script at work. Their synchronicity was fed by something unspoken, a hidden current flowing beneath the surface. Every look, every half-smile carried a weight of emotion he never dared acknowledge aloud in his youth. Away from the cameras, they gravitated toward each other. Newman would often invite Redford out for drinks after long days of shooting, and in those dimly lit corners, he revealed sides no one expected from a Hollywood legend. He spoke of his fear of failure, the crushing responsibility of family, and the emptiness that sometimes gnawed at him despite the blinding glow of stardom. Redford, usually guarded and reserved, found himself opening up in return, unveiling wounds he had carried in silence for years. And then came that night in Utah. A night blurred by alcohol, when Newman leaned in with a teasing smile and said, "You should learn how to look at someone as if they're your entire world." Redford confessed he never forgot those words. They struck him like lightning, leaving him shaken, unsure if it was merely a playful remark or a hidden message meant only for him. But from that moment on, he knew. What he felt for Newman was no longer something that could be contained by labels like friendship or admiration. It was deeper, a longing for closeness, a hunger for the quiet light Newman carried within him. And in his very last hours, Redford finally dared to say aloud what he had buried his entire life. "If there is one man I would follow to the very end, it could only ever be Paul." That confession not only left the world in stunned silence, it ripped away the glittering mask that Hollywood had spent decades constructing. After Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid exploded in 1969, the industry celebrated the flawless chemistry between Paul Newman and Robert Redford. But behind closed doors, whispers began to spread. Whispers that spoke of something far more compelling than just two actors sharing the screen. Audiences couldn't ignore it. The way Newman's gaze lingered on Redford, tender in a way that seemed too real. Or the way Redford smiled back, natural and unguarded, as though no script could ever dictate such truth. And slowly, a question began to rise. Was this truly acting, or something Hollywood never wanted the world to see? Some critics went so far as to write that on screen, Newman and Redford looked like two wandering souls, finally finding each other in a world that seemed to belong only to them. That rare authenticity was what first stirred suspicion. Could this really be more than friendship? Whispers began to ripple through Hollywood's glittering parties, where champagne flowed and lights dazzled. Newman, the married star, the perfect family man, was said to show Redford an affection far beyond what anyone expected. And Redford, in interviews, whenever Newman's name came up, he would smile faintly, then swiftly change the subject. His silence became a half-open door, inviting speculation to pour in. The tabloids pounced. They embroidered the rumors, branding Newman and Redford as Hollywood's golden couple in the shadows. Journalists picked apart every detail, the lingering glances on set, the way Redford always chose the seat beside Newman on long flights, their quiet refusals to be photographed together backstage. Piece by piece, they stitched together a hidden narrative, a love ballad playing behind the curtain of stardom. Then came the stories that ignited the frenzy even further. It was said that Newman often slipped away from Los Angeles, driving his silver car into the Utah mountains, where Redford owned a secluded log cabin. Neighbors whispered of midnight sightings, Newman stepping out in plain clothes, hat pulled low, moving quickly through the shadows as if terrified of discovery. By morning, the car would be gone. Only fresh tire marks in the gravel remained, a silent witness to whatever had transpired inside. The rumors spread like wildfire. On film promotion tours, Newman and Redford would vanish from the group for hours at a time, returning later with radiant faces that spoke of secrets never shared. One spectator in Santa Fe even swore he saw them in a dimly lit bar, shoulder to shoulder, laughing and whispering like lovers hidden in plain sight. No photographs were ever taken. Yet strangely, it was that very absence of proof that made the story all the more believable. Even Joanne Woodward, Newman's famously sharp and strong-willed wife, once half-joked in an interview, "Sometimes I feel like the third person in their story." That single remark was enough for the press to pounce, brandishing it as undeniable proof of a bond far deeper than friendship. And so, the whispers never truly died. Some swore it was true. Others dismissed it as fantasy. But all agreed on one thing. Paul Newman and Robert Redford shared a connection that defied explanation. A bond that felt both real and imagined, a soul-deep tie, half buried under Hollywood's glittering facade, half shining through cracks the industry couldn't quite conceal. Decades passed. Decades of silence. Until, at the age of 89, Robert Redford finally let the truth slip. In a rare conversation, he sat quietly at first, his lined face shadowed by memory, his eyes distant as though walking back through time. And then, in a trembling voice, he confessed, "From the very first moment I met Paul, I knew I had found my other half, not just on screen, but in life itself. He remembered Newman's half-mischievous, half-gentle smile, his rugged exterior that somehow shielded an unexpected tenderness. Newman carried a magnetism that was almost unbearable. Redford admitted it felt like falling in love at first sight. "I never spoke it aloud," he said softly, "but in my heart, Paul held a place no one else could ever touch." Yet Redford also revealed the struggle that haunted them both. They knew the truth. They felt it. A connection beyond friendship, beyond definition. It never needed words, because it lived in the glances that lingered too long, the smiles that held unspoken weight, and the silences that cut deeper than conversation. But both men also knew the limits. Families, fame, duty. So their bond was forced to survive only in the shadows. Redford recalled nights at the cabin in Utah, hidden far from Hollywood's gaze. Two men by the fire, sharing bottles of wine, their voices spilling into the night about fears, failures, unfinished dreams, and secrets too heavy to confess to anyone else. Outside, snow smothered the silence. Inside, laughter and wine mingled with warmth words could never capture. "There were moments," Redford admitted, eyes glistening, "when I thought it was the freest time of my life. With Paul, I didn't need to perform. I didn't need to hide. We were simply ourselves, achingly simple and complete. But no secret lasts forever. Joy fades. And Hollywood, relentless and merciless, was always waiting." In the America of the 60s and 70s, there was no room for a bond that defied convention. So they were forced back into their roles, husbands, fathers, icons. All that remained of those nights in Utah was memory, tender, bittersweet, and sharp enough to wound. "We knew," Redford whispered, "that there were things which could never be named, never made public. And so, we chose silence. But silence does not heal. It only prolongs the torment." And slowly, the cracks began to show. The first culprit was alcohol. Paul Newman, the idol to millions, the man whose smile charmed the world, was fighting shadows the public never saw. At first, the drinking was just pastime. But then, it became something far darker. What began as a harmless indulgence soon grew into something darker. Alcohol became Newman's constant companion, then his prison. And Redford, the man who once saw him as his other half, could only stand by, powerless, watching the slow unraveling. At first, he tried to be patient. Newman was still Newman, witty, charming, able to command a room with a single laugh. But with each passing year, every meeting grew heavier, clouded with liquor and unfinished conversations that dissolved into silence. Newman became fragile, shattering at the lightest touch. Out of compassion, Redford tried to rescue him, listening, supporting, even carrying Newman's financial burdens when debts began to pile up. At first, the requests were small, easily forgiven. But soon, the pleas grew larger. Repeated. Desperate. Redford did not care about the money. It was the feeling of being dragged into a spiral he could not escape that broke him. The bond that once gave him light had now become a chain. Nights by the fire that once brimmed with laughter and secrets turned into scenes of agony. Redford watching helplessly as Newman drowned in liquor, begging like a lost soul. "Where is the Paul the first once knew?" Redford whispered. In his eyes, Newman was no longer the radiant man he had fallen for, but a stranger, twisted, broken, unbearably sorrowful. The breaking point came one bleak night. Newman arrived at Redford's door, staggering, reeking of alcohol, eyes hollow with despair. "Just this once," he pleaded. "I need your help." Redford stood in silence, torn between love and survival. He answered softly, "Paul, I can't anymore." And then, he closed the door. That sound, the heavy, final click, sealed the end of a bond once thought indestructible. In the years that followed, Redford never stopped thinking of him. But the memories no longer carried the golden glow of Utah's fireside nights. Instead, they were shadows of a friend he had lost long before death claimed him. In a private interview, Redford's voice broke, "The greatest pain isn't death. It's losing someone who is still alive. That night, he confessed, Paul had already left him. Not by dying, but by collapsing under the weight of his own demons. I didn't walk away because I stopped caring, Redford admitted bitterly. I walked away because if I stayed, we both would have drowned. And that, he revealed, became the greatest haunting of his life. To love someone with every part of his being, yet be forced to turn away to save himself. Then came that September morning in 2008. The phone rang in Redford's quiet Utah cabin. He picked it up, unaware his life was about to fracture. On the other end came the words he could never prepare for. Paul Newman was gone. The news struck like a hammer. The phone slipped from his hand. His body stiffened, collapsing into a chair, his eyes staring into nothing. Inside his mind, only one thought echoed, again and again. Impossible. Paul can't be gone. His heart felt as though it had been shattered into 100 jagged pieces, each one cutting deeper than the last. In the days after Newman's death, Robert Redford vanished into silence. He shut the curtains of his room, locked the world outside, and let the darkness consume him. Friends whispered that he spent hours alone, clutching an old photograph of himself and Newman in their youth. Two men frozen in time, smiling as though the future would last forever. A few close companions knocked, but he never answered. His grief was too heavy for comfort, too raw for words. Memories returned like a storm, violent and unrelenting. Newman's booming laughter echoing across the set of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Those piercing blue eyes that once made Redford tremble. The firm handshake on the day they first met. And the long nights in Utah, two men by the fire, bottles of wine, secrets spilling until dawn. Each memory was a blade, cutting deeper with every thought. What haunted Redford most was not death itself, but the silence that came before it. In Newman's final years, they had drifted apart. Distance grew where once there had been fire. And in one rare drunken breakdown, Redford confessed to a friend, "I should have called Paul more. I shouldn't have let silence kill us before illness could." Newman's death tore across Redford's chest like a wound that would never heal. He knew the most beautiful part of his life had gone with Paul into the grave. Yet Redford did not weep in public. Instead, he wrapped his grief in silence. He withdrew from Hollywood, retreating to the Utah mountains and forests they had once walked together. Alone in his cabin, he replayed their films, not to relive glory, but to see Paul again, to hear that laugh one more time. "I don't watch them to remember," he admitted softly. "I watch to believe he's still here, still watching me, still smiling at me." On the day Newman died, Redford wrote a single line. Short. Haunting. An America without Paul Newman is an America that has lost part of its soul. It was not a farewell to the public, but a private cry for the man he had loved, admired, and carried in silence his entire life. And then, at 89 years old, Redford finally spoke the words he had buried for decades. "The greatest love of my life wasn't any woman. It was Paul. We never named it. We never made it public. But it was there, deep, enduring, eternal. That love lives in every film, every glance, every moment we shared. He is a part of me even now." There are nights when Redford still dreams. He sees Newman smile, hears that husky voice whispering, "We still have one last scene, remember?" Redford wakes with his pillow wet with tears, knowing it isn't just a dream, but a fragment of Newman's soul still walking beside him until the very end. Robert Redford was not only a movie star. He was a chapter of history, a man who turned his very life into the fabric of American culture. His legacy lives not just in unforgettable roles, but radiates outward, into art, into the environment, into the social causes he championed for half a century. But behind all of it lived a secret, a love story Hollywood tried to bury, but one Redford carried in silence until his final breath. Let's begin with those legendary blue eyes, the very eyes that once hypnotized the world of cinema. They belonged not just to a magnetic actor, but to a man who saw far beyond the screen. In 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid catapulted Robert Redford into stardom, turning him into a household name. But instead of bathing in Hollywood's glow, he chose a harder road, one that would transform barren Utah soil, land others dismissed as worthless, into the seedbed of an artistic revolution. From a remote mountain resort, Sundance was born. What began as a retreat grew into the Sundance Institute, then into the Sundance Film Festival, a fortress for voices Hollywood had ignored. Thousands of young filmmakers, scripts trembling in their hands, found a stage there. A stage where their stories were finally heard. Without Sundance, countless films that now define modern cinema might never have existed. But Redford's battle didn't end with film. He became one of the first artists to wield fame as a weapon for the environment. When coal companies set their sights on stripping the Kuiperowitz Plateau, Redford rose to fight. His influence, his unyielding voice, helped preserve that land. What we now know as the Grand Staircase Escalante, one of America's most treasured landscapes. For him, nature was not a backdrop for films like Jeremiah Johnson. It was flesh. It was blood. It was something sacred, something worth defending. And he carried that fight further. With his son, he founded the Redford Center, turning the power of storytelling into a weapon of conscience. Films like Fighting Goliath and Watershed were not just cinema. They were rallying cries, sparking movements, influencing policies, and inspiring communities to confront climate change. On screen, Redford carved unforgettable milestones. All the President's Men turned him into a symbol of truth and press freedom. Ordinary People proved him a masterful director, earning him an Oscar on his very first attempt. The Sting and The Great Gatsby cemented his legacy as a leading man, charming, magnetic, and impossibly layered. But Redford never performed to please. He performed to push, to challenge, to expand the boundaries of what storytelling could be. Again and again, he asked, "Can this be truer? Can this touch deeper?" That restless demand shaped films that still endure decades later. Yes, he won the Oscars, the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, even a Screen Actors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award. But to Redford, those trophies were only the surface. His true legacy was never about the medals. It was about the worlds he built, the voices he lifted, and the battles he fought, for cinema, for truth, for the earth itself. The true weight of Robert Redford's life was never measured in awards, but in the way he transformed fame into the foundation of a cultural movement. Yet behind the brilliance, his private life was marked by shadows, secrets, and heartbreak. In August 1958, under the blinding neon of Las Vegas, Redford made a choice away from Hollywood's cameras. He quietly married Lola Van Wagenen. Together, they had 4 children. But fate was merciless. Their infant son, Scott, lived only 2 months before death tore him away. That wound never healed. It carved into Redford a painful truth, the fragility of life, the brevity of joy. Still, creativity pulsed through the family. Daughter Shauna became an artist, and later generations carried the same flame. Yet marriage could not withstand the weight of time and fame. By the 1980s, whispers began, distance, cold silences, a love unraveling. Redford and Lola quietly parted ways, leaving behind questions no one dared ask. Years later, in 2009, Redford chose again. This time, it was not secrecy but serenity. He married German artist Sibylle Sagers, his partner since 1996. She was not just a wife, but a kindred spirit, an artist, an activist, a soulmate who shared his devotion to beauty and to the planet itself. Now, in the twilight of his years, Robert Redford stands as one of the last towering giants of Hollywood's golden age. But his legacy is not stored in a glass case of trophies. It lives in every independent film birthed by Sundance. It thrives in every wild landscape saved from destruction. It lingers in the memories of millions who laughed, wept, and dreamed with his performances. And yet, in his old age, Redford stripped away the armor of legend and revealed something far more intimate, the sacred bond he shared with Paul Newman. Not just a co-star, but the reflection of his soul. What they shared was never only friendship. It was a quiet, enduring love that dared not speak its name, a love that defied judgment and survived in silence. Redford's confession was more than a personal truth. It was a revelation. A reminder that beneath Hollywood's blinding lights, where illusions are crafted and stories invented, there still exists something raw, untouchable, and eternal. So the question remains, after all the films, the battles, the triumphs, and the silence, what truly bound Robert Redford and Paul Newman together? Was it destiny, or was it love? Were Newman and Redford simply Hollywood's most iconic duo, or was there a hidden love story the world was never ready to see? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if this story left you intrigued, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because there are still countless untold secrets of Hollywood's golden age waiting to be revealed.